Compelling stories are not hard to find. You just need to know where to look. Join your host, Dr. Eric Shaw, prosecutor Ryan Frank, writer Adrian Bonenberger, and comedian Ryan Connor as they interview ordinary people about their extraordinary experiences. This is Baggage.
Welcome to Baggage. With us this evening is Dr. Susan Ryan. She is a local Colorado ER doctor. She works primarily out of Rose Hospital. She is also a board member of Canine Companions, a charity that works with service dogs and PTSD. She's going to tell us some stories about her days in the ER and talking about how dogs have started to come into her world and play a bigger role. Thank you, Susan, for coming on.
Oh, my pleasure. This is fun.
Tell us about your background. You said you were from Colorado. Tell us how you got into medicine and then how you landed up here.
I think my mom will say I grew up, carrying a little doctor's bag as a child and being really upset that the little candy medicine in there was just candy. And I substituted out for St. Joseph's baby aspirin because I was really serious about being a doctor. And I have no idea why. I've got lawyers and politicians and teachers primarily in my extended family. But I came out of the womb wanting to be a doctor and followed through on it. I was an EMT before I went off to med school, and that really just made me want to be in the ER. It's hard to get that out of your system. I was just telling Eric before we started that probably those memories are far more anchored in my brain than anything from being a doctor. And I think it's because when you're young, you haven't seen it, and there's so many smells associated with it. The sound of the ambulances, the smells of iron in the blood. I remember that so distinctly in the back of the ambulance on big bleed out cases, and stuff I'd just never seen. Rollovers, heads decapitated, and it just traumatized me, and I didn't know it. I mean, that wasn't something you talked about. You were just, I was a young girl and trying to be fitting into a guy's world. So I just sort of hung with him. Having nothing but brothers, I sort of learned to be like that as a kid too. So then I went off to med school, and I actually thought I wanted to go into orthopedics because I really started to enjoy sports medicine a lot, having been an athlete. And I ended up doing a fellowship in sports medicine, but I came back to ER, and the sports medicine was great because ortho is such a big component of what we do in the ER with injuries and stuff. But I did some stuff with Olympic medicine and traveled with some teams and pro rodeo and wrestling, USA Wrestling. And it was really fun, but it just got old. I really actually preferred taking care of the average Joe athlete that, just got over an injury and really needed to do this, or a woman who just completed breast cancer treatment and wanted to do a little mini triathlon. And it was just like a reflection of their conviction rather than just like, I'm a paid professional in all practical purposes. And they had multiple doctors. It's like I was a team doc for that Colorado Avalanche, the hockey team here. And, there was like 7 doctors there. And it just sort of felt like, there's nobody at the homeless shelters, taking care of those people. And they sure could have used a dentist, an ophthalmologist, an internal medicine, an ER doc, orthopedists. It's just crazy how much care we give towards these elite athletes. And I really just have more fun with average people that, same thing in the ER. You don't plan to meet me. Your life changed in the blink of an eye. And how do I get you across this chasm of this tragedy or illness and get back to thriving again in your life? And I think in medicine, we do a pretty good job of just getting you to okay, you're good now. And then we walk away like saying, yeah, it's not my problem how you start to integrate this trauma into your world. And that's probably a slow evolution into how I started to address traumas within myself and try to recover myself and get back to a place where I thrive.
I just want to point out, about 2 minutes in, you were talking about decapitation. And then since then, you're talking about Olympic doctor, professional sports team doctor, ER. I don't even know where to start. Okay, here's where I want to start. When you're an EMT, what age are you? When did you start? Because that was your first exposure to actual live patient medicine, right?
Yeah.
22. So you're seeing these things at 22, similar to Eric's episode. You're not thinking trauma. You're thinking, hanging out with everybody afterwards and sharing war stories and not even recognizing what it is at the time.
Absolutely. It felt
Wow.
like, now when I look back on it, it feels like how people must feel in the military. But I don't know that because I've never served in the military. But there was very much a bonding thing between fire and not so much police. I don't know what it is. I love police, but they just never seem to click with the medics and fire so much. They always seem to have little headbutting. So yeah, you would sit around and you'd listen to the 911 calls coming in because the hospital had the dispatch for the ambulance, and you'd hear them, and you'd hear like a live call going, and you'd replay it over and over, and that's where they screamed when they got ejected. And yeah, I still hear that in my head, and I can't even believe we thought that was cool. It was just a new experience.
That's what I want to ask you about, because you said you described decapitations for one, and all these things. You said all these traumatic things, and then you're like, so I knew I wanted to be an ER doctor. So I'm just wondering, like, you described it as being traumatic, and then you're like, let's do it. Is it just the like what specifically drew you to it, despite the traumatic aspect of it? Is it the
adrenaline?
Like, it's the adrenaline and feeling like you're doing something right now.
I don't think I knew that, but I think it's really addicting. I mean, I think it's why, whatever they like to make fun of Robinhood as a, trading platform, because they would make it all a gamification of investing. I think you don't realize that there's ways your brain gets manipulated through events in your life, and you become more, I don't want to say victimized, but you get swept up pretty fast in that current of all the neurochemicals, and then you're addicted. You're hooked on that. To this day, I'll be 64 in a couple months. If I'm doing something, walking my dogs down, a pleasant little avenue here where I live, and I hear ambulances, I'm perking up. I'm like, I wonder what's going on. I just can't help it. It's in my blood now. And it got in there early.
So you were EMT, and then you went to med school?
Yeah.
Okay. And in med school, did you know, because you said you went the route of, I would say, being a doctor's professional, but like particularized to like athletes and things like that. Was that initially what you were thinking? Did you fall into it?
I didn't fall into it so much. I did, my sub-I rotations, kind of the elective things where you look around and speed date on rotations. And in truth, I hated my ER rotations. I thought they were all assholes. And I thought, if I do this residency, I will hate humanity. And what I did was I then panicked a little bit, because my next sub-I was an ICU rotation at a hospital here, St. Joseph's. It's just got an outstanding educational program, and I loved it. And they were like, you should stay here. Don't go to Denver Health. And I did. I started down family medicine, and then realized I hate family medicine. I don't like being in the office. I can't stand the cubicle life. And, if I tell somebody, you have heart failure or diabetes, I'm not interested in them, what you do after that. Here you go. Here's your blueprint of what to do, and carry on. I have too much ADD, I think. And so then I had to shift up, and then I thought I like sports medicine. I'll do it that way. So I did the fellowship, and then that, again, it's like you just find yourself having a series of doors open. Like, my fellowship director was the USA Wrestling's chief medical officer. So he started having me start going to all the national competitions instead of him having to travel, because he was getting older. And then next thing I know, I'm in Moscow, and I'm in Bulgaria doing world championships, and on it goes. And then you just sort of, you get a job. I was traveling with some wrestling. That was wild. They're all cowboys, and they're like, little lady, what do you have to offer us? So that was a pretty fun experience too. But, you just sort of, you get swept away in that. And then all of a sudden you wake up and you're like, I don't want to travel anymore. I don't want to blow dust out of my nose for the next 2 weeks after a rodeo. And I'm rolling up in my Beamer, and they've got dualies, and I just didn't fit in. And
at that point, where are you in your career?
Early.
So you're saying you're about 22 as an EMT, so you're in sports medicine and not sure that you want to keep doing it.
Yeah, that
What's
was
that
in
time
like
frame?
the mid 90s. So 93, 4, 5, 6, I think I did my 1996, I did my last world championships. I think that was in Moscow or Bulgaria. I can't remember. And then I was working up in Winter Park's ER. That was a ski job. That was great. It's like you deal with acute heart attacks, head traumas, lots of broken wings and things. And then I just got tired of driving up to the mountains. So there was a job that opened up here in Denver, and I've been really content here. I haven't wandered and wanted to look for more excitement. It's busy and it's fun, and I've really started to find this love of doing more than just saying like, cool, you broke it, here you go, follow up with ortho. I really like talking to them because of my knowledge. I like talking to them about, here's what you can expect in your rehab process. These are the things you want to look for in your carpenter of an orthopedist who's going to just fix this. And so I like that part, and I like it just as much in medicine. Like, just even telling somebody, they're going to take out your gallbladder tonight or your appendix. And to us, it's like, why are you crying? Well, at least to me, I'll be like, why are you crying about this? But, I've been doing this for 30 some years. It must be very upsetting to get it. It's your only one appendix. And, nobody acts like that in the hospital when you roll through. They're like, yeah, it's your appendix, no biggie. But you're like, oh my God, I'm parting paths. And so I've started to become more aware of that experience for patients, maybe. And maybe I've just become a little more sensitized because of addressing my own traumas and starting to recognize like that's traumatic to them. I still get, like, just the other day I had a shift where somebody died and the family members just kept streaming in, and each one of them would throw themselves on the ground and start wailing. And I just was like, I don't know what to do with this. Like, I still don't. I don't have that kind of background. That wasn't my family. They didn't let you have emotions. It was like, are you crying? I will give you something to really cry about kind of upbringing. So maybe ER is suited to, because I can shut that off and compartmentalize. But that was probably the start of the death of me if I hadn't changed it, because it's hard.
I found that as I started to address my underlying PTSD, that almost things did get harder, like that you felt things even more because you had packed them in so tight before that nothing kind of broke through. So it was good and bad. Like the defenses came down, but
I think
some of the stuff a little bit more difficult.
A weird gap where you're so numb you don't even know. Then you become so aware you're paralyzed, and then you maybe can work your way through. But it's not okay, I'm done with that. Like, oh, cool, I fixed that. It's an ongoing thing. It's like you constantly face it, and you find yourself pretty easily numbed by just life. I mean, like, look at the response everybody's had. Or maybe not everybody, but in my world, the response to the shooting of a CEO of a healthcare company, and people are making memes about, Burger King doesn't have snitches. Like, what? This is our world. And so how have we numbed ourselves that much that we can joke about that? And it's somebody's life.
I also love that you're so open with ADHD. I think just about every ER doctor I know has ADHD and is very open about it, and almost looks at it as like a badge of honor for working in the ER.
It's true.
Just kind of constantly moving.
We have like internal medicine residents that rotate with us, and they're all like wanting to do the deep dive on one patient. You're like, come on, man, we got 10. You got to go see, we're not interested in their vitamin D level. Come on. Like,
I can see that. I can see that being definitely an asset in a job like the ER. So trying to understand kind of the timeline a little bit. You're EMT in your 20s, in your early 20s, then med school, you go through the path of the doctor, you come back to Denver and as an ER doctor, right?
Yeah. So I'm in my mid 40s, young 40s, I guess.
Okay. With that time frame, did you have any self-reflection before going back and going to the ER of, wait a second, I'm now looking back at the stuff I recognized that I experienced as an EMT, and it was traumatic, and I'm worried about getting back into that world? Was there any that kind of self-reflection? Okay. So did you carry anything with you looking back now from your 20s that was weighing on you or affected you into your 40s when you took the ER job?
I think
Does that make sense?
I wish I had that degree of like, oh, I can help somebody recognize that in themselves. I don't know if it's that easy. I was aware that I liked the teamwork, maybe from being an athlete, then being on, a EMS squad. I liked the team. I didn't like just going in and seeing one patient and that's it. So in the ER, there's a lot more of us. There's tons of nurses, there's EMTs, there's PAs, doctors. So there's a big group, and I need that team approach. I was aware I needed more excitement, as whatever that I interpreted that as. I didn't have like some great revelation until some friend of mine, because I was in kind of a cycle of the career where you had, 4 or 5 shifts in a row, 4 or 5 days off, and they all started to a person start saying, "You're an asshole on your first day off. Like, you are so quick with people. You finish their sentences. You don't want to listen. You're just like edgy." And as a couple of days went by, I'd be myself again. And I took that to heart. And one of those people gave me a free session with a equine therapist. And I went to that. And that probably was the path that led me to some healing.
How long ago was that?
15 years ago, easily.
Okay. All right. So that started the path of, wait a second, this is some heavy stuff that I deal with on a regular basis. I need to
I didn't even think that. That's even more advanced. All I was aware of is I could not feel anything. I was numb to the world, numb to my friends, and whatever, events happened in their lives. It all seemed so trivial and just like, whatever. Like, I could finish their sentences and go, I know how this is going to play out. It was just like I was an asshole.
Those are some good friends. They stuck by your side.
Yeah, they have. Yeah, they love all my horse wisdom I accumulated.
When did you start seeing it as something else, as a little bit deeper of, this is maybe what I'm seeing at work that's affecting how I behave with others?
So I had tried going to normal therapy, where you'd sit down and talk to people, and I never could find them somebody I could connect to. Most of them, I think you're pretty smart when you make it through professions. So most of them, though, didn't seem to keep up with my brain speed. And so I'd think like, I know what they want to hear, so I just say it. But they'd always you'd tell them, I just saw some meme that said, that time you tell your therapist a really funny story about what happened at work, and then they go, "I'm so sorry that happened to you." And you're just like, oh, shit, I guess you don't get it. So that's how I found myself in typical therapy. I went to this guy who was this elegant Frenchman, and he was up in Boulder, kind of cliche-ish, but that's where he was. And he put me into this arena with horses and just started me off. And immediately, it became so evident, these lessons of life. And he said to me, as we're leaning over the rail, outside of war, you're as close to a frontline position as you can be. And I felt heard and seen like I'd never been before. So I really kind of attached to that, his source of wisdom. And I went to him for years, maybe once a month, but for years, and developed a real friendship with him. He slowly evolved in allowing me glimpses into his own life. And he had been the lead counsel that brought down Milosevic in those Bosnian wars. And you're just like, what? He would say Hillary, and I'd say Hillary Clinton. And he knew all these people because he was working with them, and he was from Switzerland. He had been an ambassador. You're just like, oh my God, you get what I'm saying. And you get the atrocities at a whole nother level. And here you are, one of the gentlest people I've ever known. And he made me start to see a path through, making friends with trauma.
What is it about horses that does the trick?
Well, they're big enough that you can't ignore them. So that requires a certain presence, I found. I was very attached to a draft horse, so huge. I mean, its hooves were massive, and, it would sometimes shift its weight, and it wasn't intending to harm me, but you had to be 100% present. The other unique thing about horses, they're a prey animal. So they are really highly tuned. You see their ears flipping, a wind can set them all getting nervous. So because they're prey, they have to depend upon their interpretation of their environment. Is it safe or not? In an instant. We do that too. We've been trained to do it through our life experiences. Oh, I know that guy. He's a dangerous type. And so you have a neurologic response that's really fast. You need that kind of a quick response. And I think the whole life in emergency medicine is you got to depend upon that instinct. I judge this person to be safe. I can close the door. I'm not going to get murdered by them. I can tell that this is something emergent I need to deal with, whatever. So you get really highly tuned. And then the horses, because they're so tuned, they really require kind of a congruence between you and them. So they don't care if you come up to them saying, I'm really afraid of you, because they sense that fear. What they can't stand that people will often try to do is bluff their way through it. And I was a bluffer. I had figured out how to crack the code of how to read my dad to keep him from being pissed off about whatever. You'd learn to read the room really fast. So horses do that. And so they read the room and say, you're actually afraid of me. And you're saying, I'm not afraid. I like horses. So that I liked that. It was the authenticity that was something refreshing to me that required you to be 100% present.
What do they do that, like, when they can, tell that you're bluffing?
Well, it depends upon the horse that you're dealing with. Like it could be a horse that bites you or kicks you, could rear up. But it also can be like the very first example he provided me was he put me in this arena and there was like 7 horses and I just walked up to one of them and was petting it. And then it walked away. And he was like, tell me what you think right now is happening. And I was like, well, it doesn't like me. And he said, tell me why you think that. And I said, because it walked away. And he said, all right, let's do this again. I want you to walk away and reapproach that horse. And then tell me without judging it, tell me your observations of what happens. And what happened was another horse in the herd, who is the alpha, walked up and did not want that horse to interact with me. So kind of pushed it away. I didn't know that because I didn't know horses and I didn't know their behaviors. But that was one of the first lessons was that is what we do. We walk into a room, we personalize somebody's response to us and take account, like we assume we're the cause of it and we're not. We're drive-by victims. They're like totally unrelated to us, how they're responding to us, which is important. Like in medicine, people react to us all sorts of ways. When you give them information, when you tell them somebody has died, they can get angry. And that's not about you. You're part of the experience, but it's not about you per se. So that's kind of how the horses were. You do things like he put me in a small arena, had me close my eyes. My back was to, he said, a stallion was going to come out. And he's like, picture a stallion in all its glory, every image you've ever thought of. And you're thinking of this black, long mane. It's going to be high energy, come thundering in. And he said, this is a stallion and all of that you're describing in its energy. And then he's like, just stand there. I'm going to let it loose. Well, God, my heart's just pounding in my chest. And then it like thunders out and you feel a dirt clot hit you. And then he's like, you hear the, you're like, well, what is, like, can I open my eyes? And then you do. And it's a mini. There's a freaking mini horse. And you've been like so afraid of it. And he's like, but don't laugh because it will bite you. It will turn and kick you. It is a full stallion. So you have to let go of some of your assumptions of what danger looks like or your preconceived notion of what any human is like or what an experience will be like, because you'll come into it with whatever notions that society, your culture, whatever has taught you. And then you have to be open to seeing it differently.
When you started getting exposed to this equine therapy and started having start that journey on that, a little bit of that self-reflection, did you look at some of the cases from the ER or even back into the EMD days differently, of like, maybe that's like trying to find the cause, or was it very obvious and you just didn't
It was pretty
care
obvious.
to deal with it?
It wasn't that I didn't care to deal with it. I'd never been taught how to deal with it. They don't give you any instruction in residency about how to manage. You might be taught how to deal with the medicine of someone having a massive heart attack. They don't tell you how to deal with a family. They don't tell you what to do when the guy is actually saved and then wants to talk with you about that process. Like that's not what we do in medicine very well. So I didn't.
That was our last episode. A guy that had an asthma attack and died and came back, and ultimately then they did another podcast where they went and interviewed everyone kind of around him on that night, and they all talked about their shared experience of him.
That's cool.
And what happened to him.
I'm gonna go listen to that. That's cool. Yeah, because everybody's got their own experience coming in. So I think that when what he gave me was maybe what I learned is that nothing's to feel ashamed about with trauma. And we've been taught like, oh, you have PTSD, like you're weak. And it's a badge of survival. Whatever you did that got you to today worked because you're still alive. You're still in the fight. And there's a part of you that's still very resilient. And then you start to learn how to navigate and share that space and recognize there are things that happen to your brain that you just don't know happened because they do it in a blink. And so you need those responses and lots of things in the military, in emergency medicine, but then it starts to work against you. So as I start to become aware of it, it created, now this is where I don't quite click with it, like Buddhists and mindfulness, and I have a hard time sitting still. But it's that pause where you have awareness of something, you can create a bigger pause, maybe through your breath or whatever tools you use, then you can choose to respond. That's what I think I really learned, is to have awareness of that in the ER. And it can be when somebody's screaming at you, take a pause and you can choose how to respond to it. And that's been true for like learning how to just continue on living. Maybe the other big thing he taught me was that you're not trying to figure out how to never feel the trauma. You're trying to figure out a way that you can still feel so you allow yourself to feel joy again. Because I felt like that had been kind of smushed. And that was, I'm not trying to lead you in this discussion and we can jump back, but I wanted to have a horse in my backyard here in Denver and you can't. But I had become a board member and a donor for Canine Companions, this national nonprofit. And I thought, I'm going to raise a dog for them. Like, this just makes sense. I can do this. And I remember talking to him about, like, with all this anticipation of it's going to be so scary. And then I'm going to have to give it back at 18 months. And like, I paused and I remember saying, like, I'm going to fall in love and then have my heart broken. And he just had this beautiful smile of like, exactly. That is what you need to choose in life, knowing full well, the end of this, you die. What are you going to do in the middle of this life? Are you going to embrace it? Are you going to let yourself feel some things and let yourself have experiences that just give you the ups and downs? And when I turned that dog in, it was a grief I had never known before because I was like giving it away. And like the ER, because it came on shift with me, it was just this untenable place. I couldn't even stand being in my own skin in the ER without this dog by my side. And I didn't know any of the science behind it. But I remember talking to Jean-Jacques. Isn't that just a cliche? His name is Jean-Jacques. And he said, like, with this smile as I'm sobbing, and I was leaning against this draft horse. And so the draft horse was dirty and I had mud all over my face. And he's like, this is great. And I was like, what's so great? And he's like, you wanted to feel alive again. That's why you came to me. And this is what is the price of entry to feeling alive. You don't get to blunt the highs and the lows unless you just want to be numb through life. That's what you were doing. You consciously made a choice to engage feeling again, and you get both the highs and the lows. And then like to drive that home, he was very somatically driven. He put a little chocolate that was like he just gave me this piece of chocolate and he's like, tell me what you taste. And I was like, salt. Oh, wait. Oh, there's dark chocolate. Don't really like dark chocolate. My head's spinning. And then he's like, now what? And I was like, oh, there's caramel. And he's like, that's like being present. when you have traumas, we take ourselves out of our present sensory being. And that's the lesson, is find things that bring you back to feeling in this moment. So it can be through smell, taste, touch. So all of those kinds of sensory things bring us back, grounding us. And that's probably the singular thing that it taught me.
I think you have an incredibly unique experience of being able to, because a lot of people, they experience the kind of radically violent horrors that can happen to human beings, decapitation, car accidents, all those things, both through EMT and ER, and it builds up over years and you stay in it. Because I think a lot of people, Eric will say, burned out, they get out. You stay in it because of your unique personality, and all of that builds up and it builds up and it builds up. And then you find this outlet and able to kind of like explore how that's affected you. I think that's really fascinating. And then with self-reflection, are there any particular cases that stood out to you of like, yeah, this is a big deal? Like you think about it, any cases that you that come to mind from time to time that you recognize as human beings aren't supposed to be subjected to this kind of stuff on a regular basis?
Yeah, I know one of our partners had a VFib cardiac arrest in front of us, and we resuscitated him, and he survived. And the degree of numbing, I mean, thank God we are trained to shut all that down, because there he is, our senior colleague. I don't know if you remember hearing that, Eric, because you were one of ours, but God, literally watched a STEMI on the monitor go into a VFib arrest. And then they like grab paddles, intubate, and whisk him to the cath lab, get his widowmaker lesion, and then he's in the ICU on ice getting cooled for 36 hours. And you're just like, that's our friend.
What's a widowmaker lesion?
Like a massive block to one of the primary vessels in the heart. And when it happens, it just makes a widow of your family members. It's like you could be fine and then you're not fine. Like you wouldn't have any symptoms necessarily. It just suddenly clogs. And
this is what you see in like movies and TV shows when you see the person like grab their chest and go down.
The massive heart attack. Yeah.
And this is in the hospital.
It was in the ER. He was on shift. No, he wasn't on shift. He came in and said, I don't feel very good. And then arrested in front of everybody. And
what are the odds, Eric, out in the field? Well, probably Dr. Ryan, you probably even better to answer this. The odds of that happening while he's driving into work
slim.
And surviving is like not very good, right?
Super slim. We actually call him 9 lives because now he has pancreatic cancer and is surviving that too. But you know, you cannot get caught up in feeling it. And I remember they brought in a counselor. Well, we're still busy. And I went into the break room like 4 hours later and was just trying to scrounge for some food. And there's this woman and she's like, do you want to talk? And I was like, who are you? And she was from Aurora. And she was like, I'm here to help you debrief. And I was like, I don't want to talk to you. I don't know you. I can't. And I'm like on shift. Like the show must go on.
See, what's so interesting about that is it's some kind of acknowledgement of like, you know, this person, so it should be a little bit different, you know, it should be a little bit more traumatic. But objectively, the other stuff you must see on a daily basis, not to downplay widowmaker heart attack, but most people would find a lot more difficult. But that's the story that you wanted to lead off with was a colleague, which I find pretty interesting because the things that go ahead.
Well, I think that, I mean, not to sound callous, but it's not somebody I know when something happens to somebody. Like, I know, like my mom at 90 broke her hip after playing pickleball, like not playing pickleball, but pulled a weed and fell and broke her hip, got it surgically repaired, and then said, put me in hospice. I don't want to live like this. It seemed like the next month after she passed away, I saw so many freaking 90-year-olds with broken hips, but that's a common thing. It's not like, oh my gosh, there must be an epidemic in this. It was just like old people fall and they break hips and it's a life changer. But every patient had to be this reminder of that's how my mom died. And that was a little, I didn't like that feeling. So I shove that down. I mean, I constantly have work. Like it's not like I'm done and I'm all healed up.
So again, I think that's really fascinating because, for example, the show is called Baggage. Eric says, "Hey, we're going to have an ER doctor on," with a little foreshadowing how you deal and help others deal with stress now and trauma in the ER. We'll get to that in a second. But when I'm asking about specific things that come to mind that you find difficult, it was again a colleague and a reminder of a personal relationship. So that is kind of that makes sense. I think a lot of people would have that same trigger. But was it specifically those kind of things, or was it the collective just human tragedy that's kind of a funnel that that an ER can be a funnel for? Did that also kind of build up over time?
Oh, for sure it builds up. I think about, some of the system failures. We have this mandate to give everybody who's a Narcan wake up, who's done an overdose of a narcotic, free Narcan to go home with. And in 1 month, I saw a guy 3 times with Narcan wake ups, gave him Narcan each time to go home with. And also during that time had seen a young man, late 20s, trying to work, has insulin dependent diabetes, couldn't afford his insulin, but I can't give him insulin. So I'm seeing this play out. Like the guy comes back, he has to go to the ICU, he can't work, and all we need to do is get him some freaking insulin. But this guy, I'm giving him free Narcan. That kind of stuff bugs me. The failures of the system, that makes for a hard day, but the actual medicine does not. The fear of like killing somebody, that's pretty motivating and can overwhelm me if I'm out in a rural place practicing. Like that's scary. And that I don't like. And that really just jacks up my heart. But the actual medicine isn't the thing. You're right. It's the connections. That's what we, at the end of our lives, wish we had more of.
We've talked about it on the podcast before, and I kind of had a little bit of an eye opener with an episode that I did where the success and the fulfillment of what you do, you're in an ER, you're saving lives, you're making a difference, has to make it just a little bit easier to deal with. And the things that don't work right make it much harder to deal with mentally, right? So you have a car accident person, horrific, you're seeing what this person's going through, but you're able to help them, versus a drug addict that seems like you're spitting in the wind because it's cyclical and taking resources that maybe could be elsewhere. That drains, that weighs on you in a different way, almost more impactful way. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's not that I don't want to give them the resources. I want to give the other.
Sure, I didn't want to imply that either. Right.
No, I didn't think you were implying it, but it's that knowledge of a little intranasal Narcan is not addressing his issue. Like this dude is on a path of an addiction because something has caused him so much pain. Maybe it was an injury and he got on prescription narcotics. Maybe he was numbing his life for some reason, which is that any different than, the path I was on? I was suffering. I just didn't use drugs. That wasn't my numbing. I was numbing myself. And as a result, distancing yourself from connections to other human beings.
So you ended up, and anybody else jump in, please, by the way, but you end up having this equine therapy that leads to almost scaling down to canine therapy. And then once you had that experience, tell us what steps you took to make the most of what you had learned from that.
So the first dog that I turned in, it was pretty traumatizing. I had co-raised it with another PA, and I didn't know she had a miscarriage like 2 weeks, 10 days before we went to turn in the dog. So we fly to California, turn in the dog, and she was just like, I'm never going to forgive you for this. I was like, oh my God. Like, I didn't think this was going to be traumatizing, but later she told me she'd had a miscarriage. And so loss was mounting on loss. And it too was shutting her down. So that was hard. I got another dog pretty quickly. And that one I co-raised with a prison program that we have here in Colorado. So I started the dog off for 4 months and then sent it off to prison for like 6 months. And then it came back out. And then I had a third dog. And that dog I raised during COVID. So that became a really big deal. One, she became a big deal because I had a picture that went viral of me in all of my headgear and her in her little vest. And we were sitting on the floor of the ER. It got picked up by CNN, and she got Good Morning America's Dog of the Week or whatever.
I know that picture. I've seen that picture.
Oh, you have? So
yeah.
It was just a random picture. A social worker took it. That was such a period of like anticipatory grief. It had not hit us yet. It was like we had seen New York, started to see the deaths mounting in New York or Italy, and then New York, and then it was just, I was scared out of my mind. And Wynn was there. So we kept her in the ER. She couldn't go visit any other departments for just infectious disease reasons, and nobody knew what we were dealing with. So there she was in the ER, and we created this little room where we put dog beds down, and we'd have some music and aromatherapy, and you could go lay with the puppy. And by then I had already done some of the science work on what is it about a dog? And there's a lot of science about it. Like petting a dog rhythmically increases some of the good hormones in our body. It decreases our blood pressure. And so that's what we were doing. And we would send people that would have a COVID death, and they'd go in there and they'd hang out with the dog, and it just saved us. It literally was one of those things that it's hard to believe. People still will talk about, like, I remember that puppy, like it saved me during that time. And then when I turned her in, Canine Companions, so I'm on the board, they said, we think there's a lot more to PTSD in the ER, and we would welcome an application from you for a formal facility graduate dog to be placed in your department to help with the PTSD, the secondary traumas for ER, EMS, police that come into your department. So there are other dogs that are with social workers in the ER, but they're protected. They're not walking around with a doc. They're not being told to lay down and you step over them to do CPR. They're, like, Peppy is unique. She's got an incredible calm, and she's perfect for the ER. So it's been a great way for me to keep up my work. I could do more, but she, like, at the end of a shift, lays across me. It's called a deep cover. And it's like the pressure is just calming. It's like weighted blankets to people. And you pet her. And I pet her throughout the day. And the paramedics come in and you can see them light up. And that's, I think, the story that you guys caught is what she does for people. It's just so random. It's like a minute or two you're petting her and it shifts your energy. And that's all I think it takes is enough of it's the same thing of the event, taking a pause, taking a breath, and you can respond differently. So you'll see paramedics get on the radio with each other. They're like Peppy's at Rose. They're like, and they all are sending. We did a funny clip on her Instagram post where the ER director asked her to come in for her review, her annual review. And it's like, because of you, we've seen a 7,000% increase in EMS volume, which is, she's just making it up. And then she was like, you're doing a pretty good job of keeping your toys in one place, but the hair, it's an issue.
So she has her own Instagram.
She does. It's a doc plus dog, all like the letters spelled out.
Okay, we'll put that in the show notes. I'm a little hesitant because without a doubt, she's going to have more followers in this podcast, and that hurts a little bit. But
I'll kick them back to you.
Thanks.
I love that you've integrated the dog for more of the healthcare professionals than the patients, because that's always the traditional model that I've always seen. Particularly like in the Pete's hospital, like the dog will go around to the floor into like the cancer ward and that sort of stuff. But it's never like the docs or the staff will peripherally get benefit of the dog, but it was never directed towards the staff. And so I think that that's so novel and so important. Are there any other, like, where else is this being integrated, or like, what are you guys trying to do to increase the presence of this?
Well, I'm not doing anything. I mean, I have a job, and I encourage people to
I hear that.
consider doing it. But yet, somebody else just asked me that, like, are other doctors turning towards me to integrate this? But I haven't gotten a lot of response, because you have to be a handler. You have to be willing to go to the campus for 2 weeks to to be trained, and you go through a matching process. It's almost like speed dating. I remember like the first dog that rotated with me was a golden retriever who turned its back to me, and I was like, I don't like you either, but I'll pet you, but I hope you find, your person. But then Peppy came and put her head over my shoulder, and I was like instantly dissolved, and I cried tears that I had not even expressed during COVID. It's a powerful thing to have survived an epidemic where you were like also in this weird world of division about whether it was even real, vaccinations, treatments, and you got in arguments every day with people. And you're just like, why did you come to the ER if you don't want help? Like, this is the help we have. If you want go to a vet.
They wanted their ivermectin.
Yeah, then go to a veterinarian.
I want to ask you about that because people hear service dog, like, great, service dogs are great. Let's put them everywhere. But it's not that easy. One, they're very expensive. They're incredibly expensive because the training, I mean, I guess if you have the knowledge, you can do training yourself. But for a lot of places, the certified animals can be cost prohibitive to some places, and the handler. Right. So a little side story, our prosecutor's office was, I believe, the first in the state to have a service dog for victims, for violent crime victims, children, victims of crime, and things like that.
Well, we have tons in our Canine Companions, places them in tons of DA's offices and with sexual crime, like whatever in the court system. And we actually have, I think, like 7 in Arkansas. We have like 4 in Colorado. It's very big. Our facility dogs. So like there is a division. So our dogs are trained. Well, we have a lot of research. And you can see that on Netflix. We have a movie called Inside the Mind of a Dog that goes through it all. But our dogs are given away free of charge. So that's an amazing gift.
Oh, interesting.
So we used to always say it's a $50,000 dog, but with inflation, it's probably 60, 65 or 70,000 now. But these are dogs that are bred specifically for this. And you can actually manipulate the genetics for disposition at the same level that you can manipulate hip dysplasia. So we use Labradors and Golden Retrievers, and we use the Golden Retrievers to dilute those lines. So we can select for disposition so that we have a higher success rate for our dogs. But not every dog can make the cut. So you can have all of our dogs are trained to the level of a service dog. So it could be placed with a human with a physical disability. We also have hearing dogs that alert you to 10, 12 different sounds. We have veterans with PTSD division that was like specifically studied with the VA using our dogs because they just don't have a bite risk. They're highly trained. We have campuses that have dedicated dorms and training rooms for people that have had PTSD through the military. So kids, children, and then our facility dogs. So Peppy still has the skills, and I make her do stuff like she can open and close doors. She knows that when she shuts one of my trash doors, that's when I'll set her breakfast down. And she like shuts it every time it's open. I'm like, you're not getting breakfast. This is lunchtime. Like I was just throwing something in. But we have tugs around the ER and she'll pull open the drawers and then shut some, and she can pick things up because that's what a lot of people like that have physical disabilities need some help with. I drop my phone, I drop my wallet, I need help picking things up, and that dogs can do that. So if you want more in your work, you look at canine.org because we have dogs just for that purpose, and they are hugely successful.
So I think that's just incredible. What's the revenue stream? How are you able to give away these? Because it's so expensive to train these dogs. How does that work?
A lot of donors.
Oh, wow.
Like the original campus, the headquarters is in Northwest in Santa Rosa. That was all donated by Charles and Jean Schultz, the cartoon Peanuts. So there's a massive campus. It's got a state-of-the-art veterinary center. And then there's a campus in Oceanside down in Southern Cal that feeds the whole Southwest region. That was given to us by Dean Koontz. So he's an author.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So each center has kind of a different vibe and tie, but it's all the same organization. They're all bred up in the Northwest. Then they get shipped out to puppy raisers, and then they're turned in for their 2 semesters of advanced training, and then you apply. And yeah, we welcome applications. We love it.
I will definitely pass that on to my office. Our limitation has been well, not so much the cost. The county, our board of supervisors is incredibly supportive of what we say we need. And when we had the service dog for years, and it was really incredible how just the tenseness of, I'm a child victim prosecutor for a lot of my cases, and just the change in the atmosphere and the attitude, and how this kid will open up a little bit about what happened to them just while they're petting the dog. It's pretty incredible. But I was gonna say what the problem with that was, it's the handler. So, staffing wise, it really can't be a lawyer, because the lawyer has to be in court so often. It's not very flexible. So it has to be basically a victim witness coordinator.
Right.
You have to find somebody that loves animals, and all of our office does, but is good with dogs, can go through the training, can be the handler, and has the flexibility to be useful and go where you need. And it's just difficult to have enough personnel to be the handler, basically, is the main limitation right now.
One of the neat experiences I had, just because I'm on the board and then had raised a puppy, was I was out paddleboarding at a little lake, and these two people came up to me, and I was on the shore with my lab, and they started hugging my lab, and I was like, really weird. And then the guy wanted to know if he could paddleboard because he'd never done it. And I was like, sure. And he went off. And then the girlfriend was saying, this is a really hard day for us. And I was like, why is that? And she said, well, it's the anniversary of the Aurora Theater shooting. And there was a Labrador that got us through it because we both survived and both of our spouses didn't. And she said the dog's name, and the dog's name was Pella, Pella, like the windows. And I only peripherally knew that there was a dog named Pella. The handler of that had been an Aurora Police Department person, but now she does child sex trafficking for a different agency here in Denver. But she got the law changed. So her husband's a DA, and with the help of a state senator, they created Pella's Law, which allowed a fully trained service dog to be in the courtroom as long as the jurors didn't see it, and it wouldn't influence.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Well, the substitute, like the next successor dog she has, her name is Fancy, and that dog's tail goes a lot. And so they had to take a little extra training to get it to not sit there and thump, because it was like not being allowed to go into the courtroom. But it's sorted through that. But it's amazing what it can do with kids. The kid won't talk, and now suddenly it's talking, petting. It's because that brings you back in that traumatizing experience. You can just talk your way through it, and now you can find a place to navigate that trauma. It's not getting rid of it. It's just finding a place to say, it doesn't have to define everything about me. And for a young kid, that's going to be pretty transformative.
Yeah.
Shape their life.
Now, that was the reason and our excuse for it, but then we also loved having the dog in the office all the time. We're a very dog-friendly office.
They're great.
I remember specifically because the woman that ran the facility or worked very closely with the facility that would do these service dog trainings, she would also volunteer at our office to help out. And she would bring whatever dog was being trained. So we would have our full-time service dog. We would have whatever dog she's bringing. Sometimes it would be like a little puppy. Somebody would bring their dog from home. So I'd send pictures to my wife of like 4 dogs playing with each other at work. And she's like, where do you work? This is not, I don't want to hear that you work so hard. But it's a nice environment to
Doesn't it
be
change
around.
the day when
It
you have
does.
that?
It does.
Yeah.
We've always had an office dog. My office manager had a dog when I started there, Boomer, and unfortunately he passed away about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. And when he did, my office manager was like, "Oh, I'm not getting another one for a while. It's just too much. He was too big in my life, and like I just can't do it." It took her all of like 2 months before she had another dog. And these dogs are basically this new one, Bindi, and Boomer had been basically trained up almost the level of like service dogs, where like they can open doors, they come comfort children. Like, and Bindi's like, immediate thing is just to roll over and just wants belly rubs. And so for the kids that are getting their shots or having a difficult day, having Bindi there is fantastic. And for all of us, it's just so nice to have a dog at the office.
It changes the energy. One thing that's pretty cool that we do is we have, so our dogs that don't quite make the cut, some of them are eligible to become therapy dogs, which is now not hourly driven work, and they're fully dependable. They can just be a real comfort dog. And we give those away you have to do an adoption fee, but so you can get our didn't quite make the cut dogs free of charge from us too.
Wow.
It is amazing organization. That's how I got involved. I was donating because I saw a group of the little kinder pups in the Cherry Creek Mall, and they were all dancing around, and their vests were too big, and they're dragging on the ground. And I thought, these are so cute. Somebody told me about it, and I started donating, and then I just got more and more involved.
As we wrap up here, I'm just so pleased with this episode. Your descriptions of kind of dealing with trauma and the way the PTSD kind of built up was what I had wanted to do with my episodes. And you did it so much more eloquently than I think I did. And so I'm really pleased at how this is coming out, because this is how I envisioned my description and my talks about it. And you just have done such a better job of it. So thank you for doing this.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I mean, I'm not an expert in this, but I definitely have put in some time. And I think that we've all been led to think that we're too traumatized and there's no way out of this path. And that's just not the truth. The truth is we can always find a way to navigate it and to give ourselves credit for having survived to this place and then finding a way to feel again and have hope. And because, it's true. There's just not very many old ER docs where, you get burned out. But I still love going to work. And I love having Peppy by my side, and I love teaching the young residents and helping people kind of cross that path of this is a really hard event and there's another way through this. And it's going to happen to all of us where we find ourselves on the other side of the stethoscope. And what better skills than to know that trauma isn't the thing to run from. It's learning to make friends with it and changing your biochemical response to it.
Well said. One last question. Who was the biggest jerk athlete you ever dealt with? I'm just kidding. You don't have to answer that.
I can say it offline, but...
Okay. All right. we'll bleep it or something. Dr. Ryan, thank you so much for joining us today. And is there anything, if people want some more information, where can they go?
Well, if they want it about the dogs, they can go to canine, which is spelled like the word of dogs, canine.org. And honestly, apply. You can become a donor, a puppy raiser. You can apply for our dogs free of charge. If I really am a big advocate of equine therapy, I don't have a go-to place. I mean, wherever people are listening to it, it's available, and it's really incredible what it can do. It's one of the most authentic places you can show up in life. And it transforms you.
In the Denver area, my PA, Carol von Michaels, owns or is one of the board members and lives at the community farm in Arvada, and they do equine therapy there.
Oh, that's awesome to know. I'm going to look that up because my guy Jean-Jacques went back to Switzerland. So I need a new Jean-Jacques.
Thank you so much for joining us. And it's nice to see that you made what others would find overwhelming and turn it into something that is very hopeful. So thank you.
Thank you.
Ryan, is there anything you want to plug?
Yeah, sure. If you've ever read books, I wrote a book. It's a novel. It's you can get it just on Amazon. It's called The Party. It's a novel. Both of these guys have read it and will vouch for it.
Very good.
And if you want to check my touring schedules on my website, ryanconnerycomedy.com. Not a lot of dates on it yet, but I'm going to have to start filling up in the next few weeks.
And check out Connor V. Cobb, very funny podcast.
Oh, and then my special on Prime, Connor, what's it called? Live from DC.
Music for Baggage provided by Quincy Ledbetter. You can find his stuff at qledbetter.com. Graphics provided by Megan Weaver. You can find her at meganweaverart.com. Special thanks to our premium members for their support. You can become a premium member by clicking subscribe in your Apple Podcast app or by visiting thebaggagepodcast.com/support to sign up or to gift a membership to someone. A percentage of all proceeds go to charity. If you have any questions, comments, or a good story to share, please email us at thebaggagepodcast@gmail.com.